Hello and welcome. You're with us here on Business Today. I'm Abha Bakaya. Here are the top business stories. Another choppy session on the Lal Street. Sensex drops over 200 points. Nifty slips below 16,150. Metals, FMCG, IT drag. Broader markets underperform. Delivery rallies after a muted debut in the stock markets. Lists at 495 rupees against the issue price of 487 rupees before rising more than 10% to 536 rupees. The logistics services company raised 5,235 crore rupees from the market. Highly anticipated Modi and Biden one-on-one bilateral talks held in Tokyo. Talks held to further strengthen US-India mutual ties. Prime Minister says India-US partnership is a partnership of trust. Good times ahead for those looking for jobs in the aviation sector, with Air India stepping up hiring of cabin crew from across India. This comes even as a resurgent Jet Airways has been looking for crew, and Akasa Air readies to fly this summer. Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg has been sued by the District of Columbia, which is seeking to hold him personally liable for the Cambridge Analytica scandal. Personal data of millions of Facebook users had been sold to third parties without their consent. The suit alleges that Zuckerberg directly participated in the breach. Business and political leaders attending the World Economic Forum woke up to a chillier start in Davos this morning. Though the snow and the white Davos meetings are still missing, forecasters have predicted rain in the Swiss town. The meeting, taking place after a 2-year gap, is also a boon for the locals, with a survey showing the town gains $60 million from every gathering. Let me now take you across to my colleague Siddharth Zarabi, who's in Davos and who will keep you abreast of all the action there.
Thank you, Abha, and a very warm welcome to our viewers. I'm here at Davos, and it's wet, it's a bit windy, and there's no snow. But what we have over the rest of the show for you, our viewers, is some of the biggest names from Indian industry talking to us here exclusively and talking about the challenges and the opportunities for India. And first up, the man who holds the keys to India's largest bank, Dinesh Kumar Khara, the chairman of the State Bank of India. It started raining, and we know that inflation is also raining down on the parade of global growth on India as well. But before I come to some of those matters, I just want to get your quick view on how you're finding Davos this time around, and what's the buzz around India and other key matters.
I think when it comes to Davos, India team is a very strong contingent which has come, and it's a very strong representation which is being put up before the world community. So I think to that extent it's a very strong India story which is being talked about, and rightly so, because if we look around the globe, perhaps India is the only oasis where probably the kind of growth which is being seen. Of course, what you rightly indicated right in the very beginning, the inflation reigning and its likely impact, that of course is a global scenario. We are a part of the global community. But if we really analyze the inflation scenario in the country, essentially inflation is attributed to two major factors. One is inflation fueled by the crude oil, and second is the edible oil. You would have observed that in last 2 days, various measures have been taken by Government of India in terms of reducing the taxes on the petrol and diesel, and also it's also being talked about for the edible oil too. So I think to that extent whatever is possible by a government, that is being attempted. The other very important feature which I must talk about is relating to the edible oil and the kind of restrictions which are there on the export of palm oil from Malaysia and Indonesia. They are being relaxed, so that will also lead to some kind of easing of situation as far as edible oils is concerned. But yes, of course, crude, I think we'll have to perhaps wait and watch for some more time. But nevertheless, efforts being put in by the government to reduce the taxes, etc., are very welcome. I'm sure it will lead to some kind of a easing effect as far as inflation is concerned in the economy.
Mr. Kara, because like you very correctly said, most of the inflation currently is supply side driven. But there is also the other bit about a liquidity overhang, and that being sort of reined in. And perhaps from all indications, what the RBI, the central bank, is telling us, a pre-COVID kind of interest rate environment is in the offing. For the general consumer, and the SBI, I perhaps need to add this here, runs one of the largest loan books in India. What is in it for the general consumer? Should he be prepared to fix his interest rate right now and opt out of floating rates? Just as an example, I know everything is floating now mostly.
No, I think, well, of course, the RBI policy rate went up by about 40 basis point midterm, and which has actually led it to 4.40, and the pre-pandemic it was at 5.15. If that is the kind of a number, I'm sure RBI will be looking at various other numbers also before they take a final call. So I think that seems to be the outer boundary as of now. But nevertheless, as far as the retail consumers are concerned, you know what it means for the retail consumers. It will be a, of course, banks will try to pass it on to the extent possible wherever there is a floating rate of interest, and of course when the interest rates are on the downward track, majority of the retail consumers had opted for the floating rate interest. So that is a reality, and on the upswing, of course, it hits. But nevertheless, I think it is also a function of the excess liquidity which is there with the system, and each of the bank will probably try to calibrate the risk premium also, keeping in mind the excess liquidity which they have. So to what extent they will be in a position to pass it on and how much they would like to pass it on will be a function of the decision taken by the various ALCOs in different banks.
My colleague Rahul Kanwal caught up with Rishad Premji, the executive chairman of Wipro, and spoke about the outlook for the IT sector amidst all the global uncertainties, and also about what the new normal will be for the work culture in a post-pandemic environment. Let's take a quick listen into that exclusive conversation.
So one of the biggest beneficiaries of what's happened during the pandemic has been the IT sector. As the world attempts to bounce back after the pandemic, what are the kind of meta trends that you're seeing play themselves out, particularly in the IT sector?
No, look, COVID has been unfairly kind to the technology industry, right? I think what COVID has done has forever changed the mindset of organizations across the world in terms of how they think about their digital journeys, how they leverage technology to engage more impactfully and smartly with their customers, right? Because that was always something that was moving. It has just accelerated dramatically through COVID. And so these journeys of how do we move to the cloud more fast, how do we leverage data and artificial intelligence more impactfully to drive hyper-personalization and segmentation so you can offer customers things that they actually want and need. How do you leverage security? How do you make your environment more secure? And how do you leverage talent that is available in countries like India smartly to drive this journey? And I think that only accelerates with COVID. And despite everything that's happening in the world, and we can talk a little bit more about that, I think that continues for the foreseeable future.
So how is the Ukraine-Russia war impacted what you're doing? Because there's been a lot of talk of geopolitical tensions impacting the way the global economy is configured. How is it playing out?
So there are multiple different elements. Certainly the Ukraine war is one component. COVID, the reality is it's not over yet. There's rising commodity prices, there's inflation, there's a lot of uncertainty. So it's quite interesting when you are here in Davos and talking to people. People are incredibly worried about the environment. They're also uncertain about how the environment unfolds over the next 6, 10, 12 months. At the same time, people are still investing. Demand is still quite buoyant. And you talk to a whole bunch of people, from the consultants to the private equity folks to customers. There's a sense of optimism in terms of spend still continuing, even though people are cautious. So I see the environment still staying quite robust and quite positive for the foreseeable future.
The one thing that's so often spoken about whenever the IT sector is in the news is the great resignation. How has it played out for you? What have you been doing to try and keep the young workforce that you have completely plugged in and not joining the Great Resignation.
You know, it's very interesting. One of the big things that's happened is we have about 45% of people who joined us in the last 24 months, right? 45% of people who haven't walked into a Wipro office, who've engaged with their managers and a couple of people around them, and so they've built no sense of connect with the organization. So we can talk about hybrid work model as well, because we're quite keen that people come back at least some of the time to drive this osmosis, to drive that engagement. But we've been trying to find innovative ways of connecting with people. How do we connect with them informally through a transactional medium like video? But there's no replacement to coming back and connecting in person. The reality has also been there's been inordinate demand and finite supply, and that also creates huge optionality and also creates a huge amount of churn. And we've been working hard to drive down that churn over the last couple of years. In fact, one of the things we've done today is we've significantly increased our fresher hiring. So we hired about 10,000 people in 21, 20,000 people last year. We'll hire 40,000 people this year. And we're giving them a roadmap. So we're telling them, when you join us today, in your offer letter, if you do X, Y, and Z, if you grow and if you perform at these levels, you can be at a compensation of X in year 5, and you can be doing these kinds of roles in year 5. So we're also trying to provide some sort of stability and visibility to people to also sort of make that a draw, because oftentimes we lose people in that year 2, year 3, year 4 time frame.
So how difficult has it been to get people to come back to work? Because many went back to their hometowns, got used to working in their pajamas. You're here all suited, booted, you got a tie as well. But is it really difficult to get them back? And what kind of hybrid models are you looking at?
No,
now?
it is tough. You know, the reality is still a large chunk of people are working from their hometowns. People have gone back, they are living with their parents, they're eating good home-cooked food, they're spending less, they're saving more. And so it is going to be tough. You know, I'm a big believer, Rahul, that we have to move into some sort of a hybrid model. We would like all of our people to come into the office some of the time. We've just opened up our offices in April 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We made it optional for people to come back at the moment. We are gently nudging them to come back. But I'm a deep, big believer that we must come back in person for 2 reasons. One is for culture. As I was mentioning, 45% of our people haven't walked into an office. Culture grows when people gossip over coffee, gossip over lunch, you know, connect with their colleagues, discover the smell of the office, the smell of the place. Incredibly, incredibly important for culture growth. And for us, we're very proud of our culture. It's one of our core defining propositions of who we are as an organization. The other is for ideas and innovation, because ideas and innovation don't happen in linear form. They happen when people are sitting together in a conference room and people are frustrated, but suddenly something strikes. And I think for both those reasons, it's incredibly important people come back. So we are going to be on this journey.
But there's a disconnect between the way that you see it in terms of wanting to bring people back because of the cultural issues, and the way a lot of young techies see it. Say, hey, Vishal, if I can do the same job sitting back home, why do you need me? Judge me by what I deliver. And if I'm doing well, why can't I keep staying at home? And if you don't like me, I'm off.
Yeah, but I think there's also a bunch of people, Rahul, that want to come back.
Sure.
That want to have a sense of connectedness, that want to have a social equation in the office, right? That want to build a sense of community around them as well. So that's equally important to people, and we'll have to strike the right balance.
What we have now is a slice of the thoughts and views of India's tech titans. And first up, CP Gurnani, the MD and CEO of Tech Mahindra, talking about what the new normal as far as the IT sector is concerned and the possibilities that 5G holds for India. Let's take a quick listen in. The bigger picture, even as we see these wonderful mountains without snow behind us, for the IT sector is global headwinds and strong domestic demand. Would that be the right way to describe it?
I think global headwinds are probably for the economy, and it is in a way strange. I've been traveling for the past few weeks. US, the discussion is more around inflation. You come to Europe, the discussion is more about the war. And you are in Asia, the discussion is more about the gas prices. Same statement, but 3 different versions.
Yes.
I think to some extent, being in the technology sector, I would say is that even during these tough times, technology sector has a better outlook than most other sectors, because ultimately the commerce has now moved to digital, and commerce means growth, commerce means, you know, doing business together. So I think technology will continue to be in the favorable limelight.
Post the pandemic, we saw a huge upsurge in digitization, like you said, and we've also seen some of it come down naturally because work shifted and some of the immediate pressures of the lockdown went away. You see this kind of growth sustaining overall for the industry and perhaps for your company as well?
I don't think it will be as steep a growth for all of us during this next few quarters. And again, I'm saying we will be in a growth phase. It may not be as steep a trajectory as it was. And the main reason is that the overall consumer demand has slowed down globally. When the consumer demand slows down, the businesses also have to adjust to the consumer demand.
Absolutely.
So while technology is the glue, technology is the the grow part of the equation, but there could be a little bit of delay in decision making.
That's an important point, and what Mr. Gurnani is also telling us, if we see it in the context of data, IT sector grew on a CAGR basis of around 3.2% globally, while Indian IT was almost 3 times that. One of the key questions that a lot of people ask, and your company, other companies in the sector face, is high attrition. We see paucity of talent and demand continues. How is the outlook as far as human talent is concerned?
Some of us who have been long enough in this industry have seen
You've been one of the
have seen the same challenge during Y2K.
Okay.
We saw the same challenge during internet boom. So guess what I'm saying is, give or take a few more quarters, the supply will become in equilibrium with the demand, and some of these shortages may not be as big as we all are facing right now.
And while the IT sector had such a major role to play during the pandemic, can that growth sustain? We caught up with C. Vijay Kumar, the MD and CEO of HCL Tech, on that matter. Let's take a quick listen into what he had to say on this. Mr. Vijay Kumar, inflation seems to be raining down on the global economy's parade. You see the United States people checking their gas bills, which perhaps used to never happen. How's it looking like, and is that emerging like a dark cloud on the horizon?
Yes, of course, as you rightly pointed out, there are many macroeconomic uncertainties, which is weighing on a lot of decision makers. But the good part about being in the tech industry, they look upon us as solutions for some of the challenges, like getting in better productivity, bringing in more efficiency, pursuing the digital transformation journey, which eventually helps their businesses to be more efficient, drive more revenues, drive better customer experience. So we are always the part of the solution. Yes.
And the IT industry played a huge role after the pandemic struck, and for around 2 years we have seen business respond in a certain way.
Yes.
Your company also responded. Your clients must have sought newer things from you. As we look ahead with hopefully the pandemic fully behind us soon, what's the outlook? What's the next year or 2 years looking like?
As you would have heard many times in the last 2 years, the pandemic has really accelerated the digital transformation much faster than what one would have imagined. So moving forward, I think cloud continues to be a very, very strong technology strategy a lot of companies are adopting. Cloud is no longer a technology project, it's really a business strategy. And it's believed that more than half of the tech spend by 2025 will be on cloud. So a lot of our propositions, whether it is the digital foundation, digital application services, or the digital engineering, where we build products using new technologies to be deployed on cloud, all of them are geared up to kind of capture the spend on the cloud.
When it comes to the cloud opportunity, beyond that, key thing that a lot of people tell me is the difficulties companies face, and that's my word, difficulties in acquiring talent and retaining talent. Yeah. We've seen that change with the pandemic. What's happening now? Are you in better control, so to say, of the HR side?
Yes, I think the whole talent equation, the more sustainable solution is to get new talent from colleges and train them and deploy them and really kind of upskill them as they kind of walk through their careers in our company. So we have really doubled down on fresher absorption over the last 2 years, and we continue to hire a lot more freshers. And for the internal talent, the strategy has been to upskill them.
While Indian industry is out here in full force, the government is also represented both at the center and the states, and Maharashtra is one of those who's putting up a big display of its potential for investment. We also caught up with Dr. P. Anbalagan, the CEO of the Maharashtra Industrial Development Corporation, and asked him about the plans that the state has for attracting semiconductor investments. Let's listen to that. Maharashtra, amongst the 5 or 6 states here, one of the most industrialized states in the country, one of the oldest states in terms of industrialization. What is the new story that Maharashtra is hoping to sell to investors?
Basically, there are sunrise industries more into, like I would say, both semiconductor and display fab. Second is like solar wafer and modules, defense and aerospace, and of course IT and other sector, and of course tourism, bulk drug, pharmaceuticals, specialty chemicals, agrochemicals, textile, food processing, even like toys. There are like 7, 8, 10 sectors which the state is looking at.
What are you now doing to attract, and what is on offer from the state of Maharashtra for semiconductor companies?
The state has a very I would say promising ESDM policy, and which gives an upfront capital subsidy. And state, like suppose, though it's like a declared policy, but we customize to the customer. So because it's like more like a business secret, but we give the best. I would always say we match and even outsmart any other proposals. And secondly, if you look at typically an ecosystem, the ecosystem which, for example, if you look at like Pune, Talegaon, Chakan, it's 10x ahead of any other ecosystem which is as of now available in the country. Because semiconductor needs lot of water, lot of effluent generation and power stability. The location which we are proposing, we have a 1600 megawatt readily available power, 24 by I would say 7. And water readily available. So that way is like one of the best ecosystem. And look at like semiconductor where it is going to. 36% goes to industrial electronics, then medical electronics, auto, and all, like of course then mobile, everything. So the state has almost more than 20 to 25% of such components already there in the state. So it's more than the ecosystem, it's a big customer also for the end product. So of course then we are the first choice for any, I would say, the wise investor to be thinking of.
Well, that's all on the Business Today special from Davos this evening. We'll be back with more. Stay with us.